one of the things I was at this morning. It had two 19th century, one 19th century one I got a kick out of, which was that, this is an old Proudhon, who was the father of French anarchism, property is theft, which is not a Marxist notion at all. Marx would never agree with that. In fact, Marx denounced that. He's got property is theft. On the other side of his cardboard sign, it said class warfare, ? And then a George Bushism. Bring it on. And yes. Okay, it is that. It took Warren Buffett, after all, to remind us, to acknowledge that class warfare was indeed going on, and that his side was winning. But now, and he said that, and I was nice of him to say that. I thought, is that me?
Yeah. No. Somebody over there.
My point is this: we need to be able to recapture, and Occupy Wall Street has helped us do that, a language that we stopped using, that our ancestors felt very familiar and comfortable with. It talked about class warfare and class struggle. It talked about plutocrats. It talked about oligarchs. It talked about the ruling class. It could say property is theft and not run for cover. But we have gone through a long generation of what I would call linguistic cultural cleansing, where you can't say these things anymore. It's a great contribution of Occupy Wall Street to allow us, because language, in the words of a linguistic philosopher, is the house of our being. It's the house of being. And if we can have a language to be differently, if we can use language we've been prevented from using before, we can. But it's a struggle, because we've grown fearful and acquiescent until now. Fearful and acquiescent. We don't question anymore what goes on within the black box of the workplace. Look at it. Used to be, our forebears looked at it all the time. Said, this can't be. There's exploitation. Exploitation going on there. People's powers to determine the nature of their own lives are at stake. Now, let's think of Marxism. Now the idea is, Marx once said, inside the black box of the enterprise, no admittance here. They said no admittance here except on business. But the problem is that's where people are living their lives. A substantial part of it is upon that activity the whole society depends. So it's everybody's business. That's the thing. These are everybody's business. How are resources that are now controlled by small numbers of institutions are deployed and distributed is everybody's business, because the whole society depends on that wherewithal to live, survive, be healthy, have a future. So there needs to be some kind of, so we need to be able to talk that language again. There's one of the famous antitrusters of the late 19th century, the guy named Henry Demarest Lloyd. And he said an interesting thing. It's paradoxical, but it's an interesting thing we should keep in mind. He said this: liberty produces wealth, and that wealth destroys liberty. And we need to be constantly inspecting that and not be afraid to talk that language. And I'm going to end by quoting one other person who wasn't afraid to talk that talk. Her name was Mary Elizabeth Lease. She started out as a school teacher in Pennsylvania, moved out west with her family, to Midwest with her family, got caught up in the great agricultural depressions of the 1870s and 80s, and she became one of the great populist, fire and brimstone orators. Enormously brave woman. I don't want to, life is complicated. Someone here might know. She had other sides to her career. She was anti-Semitic. That sometimes attached itself, right? But she was enormously brave and tough, and that didn't matter in the end what she did. She said this, because it resonates today. She said, you may call me an anarchist, or socialist, or a communist. I cannot but hold to the theory that if one man has not enough to eat 3 times a day, and another man has $25 million, that last man has something that belongs to the first. Thank you.
Party movement and the Arab Spring. In other words, there's a kind of worldwide grassroots discontent with something.
Yeah, I think you said it. I think there's a worldwide discontent with something, and I think that I think that there are real connections between. There is a fraction of the Tea Party, I think, that was initially angry about the bailout of the big banks, and with good reason. And I think and there's a kind of libertarian tendency. But if you go to Zuccotti Park, you will find it. And now, libertarianism can be anarchism, which is a kind of a flavor of left-wing libertarianism, or this kind of more what we think of as right-wing populism, but which also has a real antipathy directly at the banks. I think the connection to Arab Spring is much more direct. I think these initial occupiers were inspired, as I think we all were. Look, I teach a little bit, and I often pose to my classes what I think of as two of the great historic mysteries of history. Right? One is, why do people, for extraordinarily long periods of time, put up with what they put up with? The exploitation, the oppression, the degradation, the indignities, the discrimination. Why do they do that? The other mystery is why they ever stop doing that. Because it's very scary to stop. It's very scary. If you're an Egyptian and you've lived under 30 years of Mubarak, it's terrifying to do what suddenly was done in April. And it's a great mystery as to why. If you're a desperate, scared to death auto worker with no institution to protect you in 1935 General Motors, Flint, Michigan, and you know the company, the factory is filled with spies, right? And you'll be fired in a flash if it's found out that you'll engage in a union, or and this is in the midst of the Depression, right? And you've worked as a slave to the machine maybe for half your adult life, right? And you've been paid almost nothing. And if you speak up, you're a dead man in the shop. How do you ever, we think of unions as such ordinary things, so commonplace in that. Join a union, they'll probably take your money and run and go to Bermuda with it or something. To create a union is, I don't mean to say it's equivalent to Tahrir Square, but all of these things take great courage and ingenuity, inventiveness and sophistication, and are mysterious why they happen. But I know there's no question in the minds of people at Zuccotti Park that they are linked. And of course, that linkage comes back. The most extraordinary, never before in human history, on one day, on the same day, 1,000 cities around the world occupied. That's extraordinary. And it is true. Let's give one cheer for social media and the internet. But it didn't happen just for that reason. It happened because something profound is amiss. The system is broken, and we need to figure out together how to change it, fix it, change it, and so on. And I think that's why there was this. I'm sorry, Lauren. Yeah.
One of the things that frightened me and the advocacy in the street is very particular, which is that the markets, I like to hear about in the news is the markets and the investors. Nobody talks about the employees or the citizens or the patients or whatever. That the market has usurped governance. And the role of marketing, when I was a kid, it was called advertising, they talked about toothpaste, everybody laughed, they thought it was a joke, you bought whatever you could afford or what you liked. Now, people believe it because it exploits something that psychologists call the identification process. And it's very, very powerful. Yeah. And the thing is that we're not a culture that has either supported economic justice or distributive justice. We don't. We don't value it, and we don't value collective behavior in a sense. So everybody's their own CEO, and they're all going to function like a CEO until they draw their last breath. It's a lot of magical thinking. And I work in an ER, So I see when the rubber hits the road. And believe me, I mean, by that time it's too late to get together. But when we're talking about a nation or a culture or an economy in which generations are going down the tube, what terrifies me is that this marketing has become so powerful. It's like Thomas Frank's book, What's the Matter with Kansas? Why do people vote against their self-interest? It's like, you know, the marketing says if I buy a certain kind of makeup, I'm going to look like Michelle Pfeiffer. I mean, I'm not going to look like Michelle Pfeiffer no matter what. But can you believe it?
Why do you like that?
Otherwise, it wouldn't be so powerful and so much money wouldn't be spent on it.
Yeah.
Can you speak to that?
Well, I can agree with you, but I think I want you to take heart. And here's why. No, you're absolutely right. I think part of solving the mystery, if there are these two mysteries, and one side of the equation is why the acquiescence, say for the last 30 years, say since whatever you want, say after the 60s or Reagan's election. Anyway, why the acquiescence? That's clearly one very powerful element of that acquiescence. The promise of this kind of personalized escape through consumer culture, which depoliticizes all issues, personalizes them, and generates a kind of fantasy life, and is, after all, the great claim. You know, it used to be this worked for a very long time, and it goes back. You ever hear of the kitchen debate?
Oh, sure.
Yeah, okay. I don't know. You never know who's. Okay, so the kitchen debate, for those who don't know, was a debate that took place in Moscow, a World Fair between Khrushchev and Vice President Richard Nixon. And Nixon and Khrushchev said, you know, not at that particular moment, but he had said that socialism, communism was going to bury capitalism. Nixon said, hold on 1 minute. That's not the case. I'm going to take you into this U.S. exhibition, to this kitchen. And in this kitchen, there was every conceivable kind of, for those days, this is, I forget, the late 50s, I forget exactly what it was. Every modern appliance, every convenience, and every delight that consumer economy had to offer, many of them anyway, at that time. And he said, this is what will bury you. This is what will bury you. And there was a certain truth to that. In the end, there was a certain truth to that. And it's on the basis of that what used to be thought of as our great boast, that we are a free society, became a society free to consume. That became the
driving force.
Yeah, that became the boast. Now, why should I? And you're right. So there's enormous power there. We're living through a great crisis. I think initially, it's just speculation on my part. I think initially people thought, maybe like, say, the dot-com implosion of 2000, that the economy would recover hurriedly. Although, in a way, it never really recovered. You know, we've lived in this, it would recover quickly, and so on. And then it didn't. And so they waited. I don't mean they sat down and will wait, but I think they had a set of expectations that allowed them to resume that fantasy. And then it wasn't happening. It wasn't happening, and the perpetrators of this disaster were making out like bandits, right? Were unpunished, even a little kind of out of sorts when they were called on friendly names. Wanted to be appreciated and rewarded for their contributions and so on. Okay, and then what people I think the answer to themselves is no. This is the long haul. This is indeed a different future than we had ever anticipated. And I think that the fact that there is a Tea Party in its own way and Occupy Wall Street is a sign. That's why I want you to take. Let me say this to you. In 1932, as at the very bottom of the Great Depression, people were far more